Good evening all, and welcome. I hope you're ready for a night of fun and darkness on the night shift. We have some spooks for you today as Halloween draws near. If you really would like to get into the Halloween spirit though, why not check out my Patreon, where you can get some awesome perks for donating a little bit every month to help me keep the channel running. Some of these perks, and my favorites, probably include the power tokens, which lets you select any topic you like every month, and it'll be used in a video. I think that's pretty cool. The power to select what you see next, as well as a host of other special perks. If this is something you'll be interested in, feel free to check out my Patreon. The link can be found in the description. But in any case, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I worked graveyard shift for a long time. One night about 25 years ago, I had caught up with my night's work, but was unable to back up the work I'd done. I decided to clock out and drive to Walmart to buy a box of new discs and leave the receipt for our bookkeeper so that she could reimburse me. A few days after this incident, we learned that our computer had a virus that was corrupting the floppy disks we were using. So, you get the picture. Floppy disks for backup, no cell phones for most of us. It was a primitive time. I arrived at Walmart at 3 a.m., went in, found the discs, and decided to visit the toy department. It was early November, and I wanted to get Christmas gift ideas for my son, as well as several nieces and nephews. While I browsed, I felt someone watching me. I looked around, and there were 3 men nearby, and all were staring at me. I looked back at them for long enough to fix their appearances in my mind, and went on to continue looking at toys. I was in no hurry. I was off the clock and wouldn't need much time to back up my work after I returned to the office. So I continued to look around, even strolled through houseware for a few minutes. Every time I looked over my shoulder, those 3 guys were close and watching me. After the second time, alarms were sounding in my head. They were repellent looking, with pasty pale faces, as if they spent all their time indoors eating junk food, and their eyes were cold and hard. What disturbed me most was the way that they were dressed, much too warmly for the weather that night. Even though it was November, it was about 55 Fahrenheit outside. I was perfectly comfortable in a jean jacket. These guys were in heavy coats, suitable for sub-freezing temperatures, and they had them buttoned to their necks inside the store. The only reason I could think of for that was that they were hiding weapons beneath those coats. I finally headed towards the cash registers, thinking that if no one else was leaving the store when I did, I would ask the cashier to call security and request an escort to my vehicle. As I reached the register, I saw my stalkers standing just inside the doors. They muttered amongst themselves for a moment, and then they exited the store. As I was paying, a man and woman lined up behind me. I had seen them shortly before I neared the register, and they didn't seem to be paying attention to me. I moved to the area between the registers and the door, and stood waiting for the couple, fiddling with my buttons and blowing my nose. When they moved towards the doors, so did I, just staying a few steps ahead of them. I had parked not far outside, and I reached my vehicle quickly. The stalkers were sitting in a car that was parked nose to nose with my pickup truck. I hopped in, locked the doors, and sat back and stared at them. The couple I had used as my unwitting escorts walked past me and the stalkers and got into their car a few spaces away. They left, and after a minute or two, the stalker driver said something to the others, started the engine, and pulled away. I watched as they slowly left the parking lot, then ascended the nearby interstate highway overpass and took the entrance ramp. Only then did I start my engine. I took my time looking around as the engine warmed. I continued along the street for a few miles past the interstate, then pulled into a dark lot behind a strip mall, turned off my lights and engine, and waited, watching the few vehicles that passed. I wanted to be certain that I would not lead these guys to my office building, which was isolated, and at this hour usually deserted except for me. After my pulse slowed down to normal, I restarted the truck and returned to work. I'm a female, but I'm almost 6 foot tall and weigh 175 pounds. I know that my size has protected me from a lot of mayhem over the years. I was also armed that night. I carried a loaded Smith & Wesson .357 revolver, as well as a speed loader, which is like an extra cylinder full of bullets. Still, that probably would have been no match for 3 determined assailants. This experience cured me of my nonchalance about running errands in the wee hours, and validated my conviction that any time I get the feeling someone's eyes are crawling over me, it's wise to look around and find the reason. About 3 months later, my husband and I were watching the local evening news, and they showed photos of 2 of the stalkers. They were wanted for armed robbery. This really freaked me out. I had just started working graveyard at the gas station close to my house. I believe it was the 6th shift I'd done, but the 4th by myself. It was just after 11 o'clock, and this man came in. He's about 40 and had the dumbest haircut I'd ever seen. A blotched bowl cut. Anyway, he asked me if I had change for 100. I told him I'm sorry, but I wasn't allowed to take it, and even if I was, I still didn't have the change. Just as a side note, the company's 3rd shift policy was that we were not to take $50 or $100 bills, period. Well, he got upset and started complaining. He started trying to talk to me into getting him change from the safe. I apologized, but again said that I couldn't, and I tried my best to continue on to the elderly customer waiting behind him. He called out to his friend to ask if he had anything smaller. The kind lady I was waiting on asked me to hold her bag while she used the restroom. Bullcut's friend comes in, and I immediately saw that he's on drugs. Now I try not to judge people, but it was obvious. His face was covered in sores, kept touching at them, and he kept bouncing in place on his toes. The friend started asking me questions. "Hey sweetheart, how you doing? You always here by yourself? Do they let you have weapons behind the counter? Do you carry one at work? I always carry a gun. How much money do they allow you to carry in the drawers? Do you still have to do the safe drops even though business is so slow?" Each question that he asked made me slightly more uncomfortable. I'm kind of a mouthy woman, and I don't always use my head before I speak. Finally, I interrupted him and was like, "Look, do you plan to rob me? Because if you are, then you're wasting your time. I don't have time for this, and I need to get back to work." His hands fly up, and he started sputtering. Whoa, rob you? I was just trying to make conversation." I answered, "Well then your conversation skills could really use some work. You don't ask a woman working alone overnight those type of questions, so the real question is what's wrong with you?" I saw now that Bullcut had pulled the car horizontally across the parking lot spaces closest to the door. Upon seeing this, I was just beyond done at this point. I told him to leave the store and never come back during my shift, or I'd call the cops. He left. The poor woman who had gone to the bathroom, had heard some of the exchange. She came up to me before leaving the store and asked if I was alright. I told her that I was, and thanked her. Just a weird customer that gave me a weird feeling. He only came back once after that. I was in the cooler and could hear him yelling at the manager about not being allowed at the store. The manager told him that he had listened to the audio and would have done the same thing I did. I know what some could possibly be thinking. I was over defensive and dramatic. He was probably asking about the money because I couldn't change his friend's 100. But what about the other questions? I still don't know. This happened around June last year. I had been working at this grocery shop for over a year as a cashier and became kind of friends with a few of the people I worked with. I was often put on the night shift, finishing at 11 p.m. if I remember correctly. So it was usually me, another cashier, and about 5 night fill people who restock shelves and whatnot. On this night, one of the night fill people working was Patrick, a charismatic early 20s student who was super nice to everyone in the store and sometimes hung around the counter talking to me and the other cashiers for a bit when it wasn't too busy. Nothing strange about him. I actually liked it when he was working because time passed quicker and I actually had someone to talk to. Little did I know. At around 9 p.m. I went on my break. The office/break room was downstairs and the staff bathroom was next to it. While I was having a snack, Patrick came in and we had a short conversation. I think we were just talking about what we did outside of work and whatever. He left and after finishing what I was eating, I went to the bathroom. The staff bathroom was just a single room with no stalls, no lockers at the back where we put our things, a toilet next to them and a sink. As soon as I walked in, I noticed an open locker at the very bottom next to the toilet with a bunch of someone's things in it. I remember very clearly noticing it because I saw a pack of cigarettes and I really wanted to take one because I'm a smoker who wouldn't buy her own cigarettes at the time. I sat on the toilet to do my thing while I was still looking at the locker, and I noticed there was an iPhone face down propped at an angle with a jumper. An instant Kill Bill siren started going off in my head. I ignored it for a bit and just closed the locker door. I finished doing my thing and began pacing around the bathroom. I knew this was dodgy because firstly, why would anyone put their things in the bottom locker next to the toilet, which is probably the filthiest place to put them? Secondly, even though most people didn't have locks on their lockers, who would leave their locker wide open with their phone in plain sight? I kept thinking for a few minutes, trying to figure out if I should pick up the phone and check out that it wasn't being recorded. And at the time I was thinking, but if I'm not, that would be so disrespectful. But I also didn't want to find out that I was in fact being recorded in the toilet. Finally, I snapped out of it and realized I had literally nothing to lose and grabbed the phone and checked. Sure enough, there it was. The moment I grabbed the phone and looked at the screen, a video stopped recording. In front of me was a home screen with all the usual iPhone apps, and amongst them was one called Hidden Camera or something along those lines. A photo of Patrick was in the background, and I absolutely lost my mind. I opened the app, and on there were many videos. I scrolled through it to find the most recent one and began watching it. The video starts with Patrick putting his phone down and propping it up on his jumper to make sure that the back camera is facing the toilet. At this point, I'm pretty sure I'm crying and shaking from how messed up this whole thing is. I then fast forward to the last few minutes, as it was around 10 to 15 minutes long. I see myself going into the bathroom, pulling my pants and underwear down, sitting down, and all the while looking at the locker and then closing the locker door. This whole time, I was trying to convince myself this wasn't actually happening, but that was all the proof I needed. I sat on the toilet and kept crying, not knowing what to do. Then I started messaging my friend's group chat, obviously distressed and trying to explain as quickly as I could. I wasn't sure if this was something that required me calling the cops, but I think one of my friends finally told me to call them, so I did. I tried to explain what happened quietly. I was really scared that Patrick had figured out something was wrong in the toilet and was trying to get in, and was also scared that the cops wouldn't help me since I wasn't really in physical danger, even though this was definitely very illegal. I just felt violated, but like it was somehow my fault, like I was in the wrong for not having checked the phone in the first place. I was told to wait in the bathroom until the police came. I waited for about 40 minutes just crying and shaking, messaging my friends. I then heard a knock at the door, and it was the police. I let them in and they closed the door. Behind them was Patrick looking like a scared dog. I told them what happened. They looked at the phone, gathered all the evidence, arrested Patrick, and took me to the police station to take my statement. I knew he had been released on bail until his court case, and he wasn't allowed near me or my workplace. But I was terrified that I would run into him and he would try to hurt me. But thankfully, it never happened. The police kept in contact with me and let me know that they had found hundreds of upskirtings and staff bathroom videos. Patrick was charged with several offenses and sentenced to 10 months in jail, and was later deported since he was here on a student visa. So anyway, today I'm happy to say, gross creep, we probably won't meet again. I'm a manager at a movie theatre and often work until about 2 a.m. I have a few stories that come to mind from creepy experiences working the night shift. The first one was when I was walking down a hallway to clean a theatre while talking to my projectionist. I walked into the theatre, got to the top, and started cleaning the top row. I saw my projectionist cleaning at the bottom of the theatre, and as I turned and said, "Thanks for helping me," I realized there was no one there. I got out of the theatre, and he just started coming down from the booth. I asked him if he was in the theatre cleaning with me, and he said, "No, I went up to the booth when you walked into the theatre." The second one was another time I was cleaning theatres. I was in one theatre when I heard something move behind the screen. There's a 2-foot gap between the screen and the wall, and people put stuff back there, but I've never heard noises before. I was creeped out and left the theatre. The next theatre over was my next to clean, and when I was walking in I heard children laughing and running around. I turned the corner to look up, and there's no one there. The last story was when I was closing to turn off an IMAX. I was standing at the unit running the first part of the closing schedule when I heard the back door to the booth close. This is a stairwell that I'd only had the key to, and it's so out of the way that no one uses it. I started at the hallway waiting for someone to turn around the corner, but no one did. I finished starting the shutdown for the IMAX and heard the door close again. I ran over to the stairway, and the lights weren't even on, and there's no way anyone could have made it down the stairs to turn off the lights in that time, even if they did have the key. These experiences have creeped me out aplenty at night at the movie theatre. It was 2016, and I had just started a new job at a motel. It was low pay, but I needed an office job. One of my friends, Michael, got me this job, and for a few days I did training with the owner in the mornings. For the 2 nights Michael trained me, our job was the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Nothing exciting. Checking guests in and doing paperwork. My boss, the owner, went away with his wife on vacation for a week, which is attributed to the swift training I had to endure. So it was my first night alone on the night shift. There was a monitor with security cameras around the motel's property, and a large glass window all around the office building with a glass door. There was a no nights window, like most motels have. It was about 1 a.m., fairly early into the night, and I was just doing my normal check-in paperwork when a man walks in and asks if we have any rooms available. Usually if someone is sketchy, my boss has me lie and say no, but he seemed normal at the moment, and without hesitation I said, "Yes, of course. Just for one?" "Yes," he replies. So I begin creating the reservation on the computer, when I notice he starts swatting the air and making spitting noises as if he's surrounded by flies. I try to ignore this. As far as I was concerned, it wasn't my business, so I try to check him into the room as quickly as possible. I give him his key, and he's on his way. At this point in time, I could be described as very timid. I had a lot going on in my personal life, so I hope you can understand all my reactions to what happened next. The man comes back from his room and slams his hand on the glass door and causes me to jump. Absolutely frightened, I look up to see him just staring at me. He cracks the door and puts his head through it and says, "I can't get into my room. Why won't you let me into my room?" My only defense is trying to be helpful, so I replied, "Maybe there's something wrong with your key. Let me give you another one." The look in his eyes was inexplicable. I felt like I was in absolute danger. I handed him his new key, and he went back to his room. I'd tried texting Michael because he was the one who trained me, though it was the middle of the night and he was asleep, but I just needed some guidance. With no reply from Michael, I noticed the man trudging down the stairs to come back. I go into absolute panic mode. I run into the back office and lock the door, and I pull out my pocket knife. It's important to keep protection when you're working at night, and I hear the man in the office yelling, "Hello? Why won't you let me into my room? Do you not like me?" Me being an absolute idiot and not standing my ground and calling the police when I'm feeling scared, decided to take this situation on alone. "I'm just on the phone, I'll be right out." I then start calling Michael over and over, but there's no answer. I decided to take a few deep breaths and then step out of the office. The man wasn't there. He was in the bathroom. I start hearing him talking to himself, angrily saying, "Kill her, kill her." My heart sank. Still being an idiot and not calling the police. He comes out and I say, "Your key was broken, I'm sorry, let me escort you to your room." He agrees, thankfully. I was wearing a long-sleeved sweater, so my arms were down and able to hide my knife in my hand while holding it. I began to walk outside and he seemed insistent to walk behind me. He began making our way to the staircase and up towards his room. I was sweating from how nervous I was, continually looking behind me to make sure he wasn't going to make a move. He stops at a room, and I stop at his room a few doors down. I smile and say, "Oh, that's the wrong room. This is your room," as it clearly said on the door. The whole time he was going into someone else's room and trying to open the door. I felt bad for them. I quickly ran back to the office and locked the door. The next guest I checked in was a police officer from a few towns away. I felt bad for confiding in them about the guy, but they seemed willing to keep an eye and ear out. Over the next night, the man came back. but I had the doors locked and told him we were all booked up. I explained to my boss what happened when he got back from vacation. However, he didn't take me seriously. I continued to work there on the night shift for the next year, where many other strange encounters happened. So, strange man, let's never meet again. And if you ever feel uncomfortable, always call the police. Last month, I got a job at a mini-mart to pay for uni, since my savings weren't quite enough. I was only able to take night shifts, since I spent most of the day at school and at home studying. When you're on the night shift all alone, it's not too hard, since barely anyone comes in the evenings. There's an office when employees can hang out when there's nothing to do, and there you can monitor the security cameras and go over what needs to be done. The security cameras even have built-in motion detectors that will alert you if movement is detected. I spend most of my time there with snacks and playing on my phone while I wait for customers to come in. The other employees describe it as getting paid for being alone in a store with the occasional break to help the handful of customers that come in during the night. On my first shift, I immediately noticed something out of the ordinary was going on. The motion detectors would go off whenever the store was empty, and the cameras didn't show anything. Then I began hearing faint voices and footsteps from within the store. The voices would be indistinct, but spoken in the same tone that a person would usually speak in when they're chatting with someone they haven't met in a long time. Even customers would sometimes hear this and think it was me saying something when really I hadn't said anything at all. I usually go to checkout but find nothing. The store will be empty, and later when I was refilling the soda cooler, I started seeing people walk past me in the reflection of the glass door, but no one was there. This happened several times, and I never saw anyone near me. The coolers would also sometimes open and slam quietly shut at random times. Do you know that feeling you get when you're in a crowded room? That minor claustrophobic sense? And that feeling like people are looking at you? That's how I always feel when I'm closing up the store and cleaning up. It could be paranoia, and I'm just imagining it, but my past experiences led me to believe it's not. I've never had the nerve to mention this to my boss out of fear of getting labeled crazy and possibly fired for being unfit, but I am dead certain there is something going on there. I don't intend to quit anytime soon, since I don't feel like I'm in any danger, and I don't need the money, but this scares me a lot. Every night seems to have more going on than the last, and I've began writing down in my phone what I witness. I'm not aware that anyone has died in the store, but it's been open since the 1920s, and anything could have happened. I've wanted to do research, but it's changed names and owners several times, which makes it a bit difficult. There are also times when I begin to hear footsteps when I'm alone inside the store doing inventory or other duties. Sometimes I hear them walking right up behind me and stopping. It was a problem I had encountered earlier, but now it's become much more clear. Everything else is still present. The slamming coolers, moving reflections, and they've stayed relatively the same for now. What's made me sure of it was one night when I was closing up. I turned off the lights, and before I walked out of the office, I glanced at the cameras and saw a person standing in the store. I panicked and turned the lights back on, and they were gone. I didn't see it clearly, so it could have been an illusion, but I'm sure I saw a person. This, however, only happened once. After taking shifts there, I also have a harder time falling asleep the same night. It could be paranoia or irrational anxiety over the store. but it's possible that it had something to do with it. This doesn't happen at my other job. I've decided to give him my 2 weeks' notice soon. I've got another job as a security guard at a concert venue, and I think I'd be better suited. I doubt a lot of people will believe me, but I swear, it's all true. A little over a year ago, I had a job working overnight at a gas station close to my house. I'm a woman and was 31 at the time. I know to some it seems unsafe for a woman to work graveyard shift by herself. However, it was a slow store and the sheriff's office was about 20 feet from it. I didn't really think I would have many problems. There would be about 30 customers in an 8-hour shift, and that was on a busier night. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to sweep the parking lot and last minute check the trash. It was time for a cigarette, and I had a headphone in, just kind of jamming out. Across the road in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, I saw a figure with his back to me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, he looked like he was enjoying a much-needed piss. Against the sheriff's office, though? Yeah. The building closed at 4 p.m. and didn't open until 6 in the morning. But why? By the back of his ripped t-shirt, I remembered that he had come in about 4 hours earlier. He was a total creep, and I could already tell he had a good buzz going on. I didn't say anything. I just took my eyes off him and tried not to draw attention to myself. It was working, until a car pulled in. I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look at the car and then at me, and then back and forth again. As the customer was leaving, I walked her outside. I still had half a smoke burning, and I had left my dustpan outside with the squidgy. We both heard him start to swear angrily, and seemingly engage in an argument with himself. She looked across the road and told me to be careful. I made an awkward joke about him being the one who should be more afraid of me, or something to that effect. The man was still there but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of my store. Whatever he's yelling was completely unintelligible. He was obviously very drunk and could barely stand straight, still swaying away. I didn't engage him, but I didn't take my eyes off him during this time either. I just slowly walked back into the store. Something about his face really bothered me. It had a darkness to it, but his eyes looked wild. My experience doing graveyard jobs has been that the crazy-eyed ones are the worst ones. I didn't like it at all and wanted no part in it. I had almost 3 hours to go, and 2 before any employees even got there. I instantly went on the computer and typed up a temporarily closed sign, just in case he wanted trouble. I was coming up to the counter and on my way to the doors when I saw that he had walked across the road to my side. I literally just barely got the second door locked when he stumbled into our very small parking lot. My hand mimed the hand signal for cut across my neck, basically saying, "Nope, sorry, you can't come in here, we're closed." I shook my head back and forth, hoping to discourage him further. He started walking away, but screamed something at me as he was walking. I don't mean he was grumpy and shouted at me or yelled. I mean, he was at an enraged volume and was violently throwing his hands everywhere. Definitely knowing I'm in the wrong shift of the wrong job, I got really skeeved out and decided to call the cops. It's a good thing too, because the minute I hung up with them, there he comes again up to the door. He starts pulling and banging on it. He backs up and runs into it, trying to ram it. Not that it would have done any good. I made the mistake of telling him that I'd called the cops, and his ass was about to be grass. I say I made the mistake of telling him, because once I'd said that, he took off. The police never found him. They drove around the road and surrounding neighborhoods for over an hour, but found no one. He was on foot, so I don't think he could have got very far. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, I didn't fill out a police report or anything like that. I was safe behind thick glass doors that were locked for the rest of my shift. It just sucked. Maybe if I didn't warn him ahead of time, I wouldn't have ever spent the last 3 months of my job constantly looking over my shoulder. I never knew what the right choice was. I'm just glad that I don't work there anymore. This happened around 3 years ago. I worked as a correctional officer for about 5 years in an old country jail. One night, while I was doing my rounds, I entered our high security unit. This unit was mostly for unruly and dangerous inmates who often liked to fight over others or who had high notoriety cases such as murders. It was 11 o'clock at night and the lights were about to go off. In this particular unit, a lot of the inmates would stand at the doors and watch the dayroom TV from their cell, since it was a solitary housing unit. I finished my rounds downstairs and I began climbing to the top tier. I glanced up at a near cell and saw an inmate watching TV from his door. I looked away and looked back, and in an instant he was gone. I walked up to the cell and looked in. It was a completely vacant cell. My stomach dropped. I had heard from co-workers and inmates often that the jail was definitely haunted, but this was my first personal experience with anything of that nature. I finished up my rounds and returned to my sergeant's office, where I told him about what I had experienced. Very calmly he asked which cell it was. I told him, number 7. He told me that about 15 years prior, an inmate had ended their own life in that exact cell after he was charged with the murder of his child. My sergeant was a young officer at the time and was the first on the scene. He told me that he truly believed that the inmate was framed for the murder and the mother was truly the guilty one. The story gave me chills. Several years ago, a man died in our restroom from an overdose. Ever since then, the door locks by itself at random times, preventing customers from using it, as this is a unisex bathroom. I usually get called over there by customers to help. They think someone locked it from the inside before exiting it, as the lock doesn't work while open. I go to knock, get no response a second or third time, and then a low grunt noise. I also double-checked it's fully locked, and it is. This door can only be opened by a special key the manager has, or the local fire department. On several occasions I've seen feet move from underneath. I'm certain that it's a problem of the paranormal, because I've checked many times to check who's there, and who goes in and out of the bathroom. Eventually, after about an hour, it's quiet in the restroom and I open it. It's unlocked and empty, and this has been reported to us by employees and customers alike. I'm just wondering what I can possibly do because it's very annoying. This is a 24-hour corporate store every day of the year. I can't sage, bless, or anything. It's a damn bathroom for crying out loud, and I obviously can't put a camera in there. As a side note, this isn't the only person that's died in the store. A manager in the 70s passed away of unknown reasons in our back room. We call it the haunted room, because if the door is left open and propped with a heavy object, it will move the object and slam shut, when no one is looking, of course. This has happened to myself on the graveyard shift on many creepy occasions. I work at a retail store in a not so nice part of town. Since the area isn't the best, not many people ever come into the store, and even less people come in at night. Something important to note is that the store does not have any cameras, nor does it have a panic button. So basically, anyone could do anything, and we have had many people steal little things here and there. Looking back, this should have been my first clue to quit ASAP. I am a very small girl, and working with me on one particular night shift was my co-worker, who was basically the exact same height and build as me. We were joking around and playing games on our phones because it was 7:30 p.m. at this point, and no one had come in for about an hour. Suddenly, a group of people of 2 men and 1 woman come in all at once. A side note about these people is that they were all wearing black from head to toe, had facial tattoos, and were very confrontational upon arrival. The woman was a very husky woman, and I was honestly very intimidated by her. The 2 men were at least 6 foot each, towering over both me and my co-worker, who were both a mere 5'3". One of the men immediately asked us what our ages were and complimented me on my smile. I kind of awkwardly laughed, trying to be as kind as possible to get them to leave quickly. The woman corners my co-worker over on one of the aisles, so she's unable to walk over to where I am, which is right behind the counter. The woman is basically yelling at my co-worker, asking why we wouldn't hire her and that she needs work. She was pretty much scaring the both of us. And while this is going on, one of the men walks over and blocks the door. The other man comes up to the counter and looks at all the $100 to $300 items that we have stocked, and jokes to his friend about how he needs all of these items. He then turns to me and says with a deadpan face, "Give me everything." I awkwardly laugh and say, "Everything?" He then says nothing and continues to stare at my face for 5 more seconds before repeating, "Everything." So I do just that. I start to take things off the shelves while he points and says, "Give me that, 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 that." He then stops and says, "You never asked me how I was going to pay for any of this." The entire time, his friends are saying nothing and standing still while staring at me. The man then breaks his stare and laughs, prompting all of his buddies to laugh along with him, and states that they are going to come back. As soon as they leave, I make a beeline for the door and lock it. I call my manager and tell her what happened, and I'm begging for her to let us close up, because I don't want these people coming back. As if on cue, they come back and yank on the door, which was locked, and continue to yank it. I tell my co-worker to run with me to the back, and we lock the bathroom door and call the police. By the time they arrived, they were gone, and nothing could be done because of the lack of cameras in the store. The police stayed outside the store in their cars until we closed, and then walked us to our cars. Throughout this whole ordeal, no one was in the store besides my co-worker and myself. My theory was that they were scoping out the situation before leaving and coming back with a firearm to actually carry out the robbery. Luckily, I had locked the door the moment they stepped out. I don't like to think what would have happened if I had brushed it off and decided to leave the store open. But I was shaking like a leaf when they left, and they hadn't really done anything at all, so I trusted my gut feeling. In any case, I quit that job. Thank you for being the catalyst to push me to finally leave, but let's never meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. As always, a huge thank you to my incredible patrons for helping me keep the channel running. If you'd like your name at the end of every video and loads of other perks, feel free to check out my Patreon. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to show it a little love. Leave a like, comment, and all the good stuff. If there's a story that you would like shared in a future video, send it to my email or post it on my Reddit page, and it could be read in a future installment. Sorry for not posting yesterday. So we've moved house lately, and the house is completely empty. Fun. So part of the problem is we were getting our wardrobes built yesterday, and that makes a lot of noise. And the guys who came to do it said, "Oh, we won't be here for all that long." And I was like, "Yay, I'll get a record in the afternoon." But they were here for so long. They had to do their job, that's fine, But I didn't have an opportunity to record. Sorry about that, guys. Hope you didn't miss me too much. But yeah, we've got some exciting stuff coming the next few days. Some really requested topics coming out very soon. Super excited about it. And the special Halloween video is in the works still. And I'm hoping I can get it done for Halloween night. It's going to be good. In any case, I hope you all have a really great night. And I'll see you all in the next one.